excited to be with you today and to see all these different faces coming up. So thank you for joining me. It's actually like the 1 week of that the year that we're actually even closer together in the time difference, because we changed our clocks last week, and I know you're changing next week. So we're only 6 hours apart. So I feel even closer to you, and I'm excited for this tour today. So please, what I'm looking forward to doing is to taking you on a glimpse of the place that I work at the Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv. As I mentioned, I have the privilege to work on educational programming at the museum. But we not only at the museum, we also work with Jewish communities around the world and take content from the museum and work with communities in over 40 countries. So raise your hand if you've been to Beit, the Diaspora Museum. Okay, so I see a few hands. Thank you. Raise your hand if you've been in the past 4 years. In the past 4 years, we've actually opened up a new wing of the museum, and we're actually in about 2 months gearing towards an opening of a complete renewal of the core exhibition. So I hope we're able to host you sooner rather than later, sooner than we all think with international travel. But we prepared for you today in the tour are going to include some displays, both from Beit Hatfutsot, as you might remember in the past, from what's currently at the museum, but also a few glimpses into the new exhibit. I want this to be an interactive tour, so please feel free at any time to write a question or comments in the chat. Okay, I would really, really love to hear you. We're gonna have time at the end also, but please feel free. I'm gonna ask a few questions as well also. Our focus at Beit Hatfutsot, our motto is "You are part of the story." We each have our own personal story, and that personal story creates to a story much greater than us, right? We're all different colors and shapes, and we make up that part of that unique and ongoing Jewish story. So we always say at the museum, we're going through displays, but really, we're the displays, we're the story. So when we're focused on our tour today, which is about American Jews, I want us to look at the displays, but always think in where this brings us, back to us. And where does our story fit in? Do we agree? Do we not agree? Do we see ourselves differently or similarly? So I want us to think of that. And on the further tracks that we'll have throughout the year, the other 2 tours will also get further acquainted with different communities as well. So just before we start, and I'm going to share my screen, I'd like you to please write on the chat when your family came to the United States. Okay, you can also ask, write from where. I'll say that my family came at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. Later, we moved to Israel when I was younger, but all my grandparents and great-grandparents, all my great-grandparents came then. Okay, great. So we have late 1800s, 1939, 1962, 1949, 1939 from Germany. Great. Vilna, 1905. Amazing. 1890, Romania, 1949. 1900. So we have all these different times, right? Early 1900s from Russia, from Germany, 1899. I always find it fascinating also when those of us who know in a specific year or a specific place where our families are coming from. Very often, at least sometimes at some parts of my family, where are you from? We know Russia, we know Moldova, but not always do we know the name of the specific town. 1905, Lithuania, 1887, Lithuania. Great, thank you. So please feel free to continue. And I think it's amazing we can see all these different times just for the group right here. And I hope that we can see through some of the displays how our families connect to those, to what we're seeing. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Here we go. Great, thank you. And we're going to take a walk into our museum. As I mentioned, we're located in northern Tel Aviv. We're actually on the campus of Tel Aviv University. This is our museum at regular days. And actually, just before, we're going to stop off in our first stop is going to be in our synagogue gallery. Many of you may remember, those who have been to Beit Hatfutsot, one of the things that a lot of our visitors remember are model synagogues from around the world. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at a synagogue not so far from you, right? Also on the East Coast in Newport, Rhode Island. And we're talking about the oldest active synagogue in North America. Now, at Beit Hatfutsot, we always say that a building can tell a story as well. So let's take a look here, just from the outside, before we go in, and I assume, raise your hand if you've been here, right? So, yeah. So here, just even before we go in, let's take a look on the outside. We see this is the street, and the building is diagonally, is on a right, is not facing the street. So we can see that here the building was built like that because as we know, synagogues around the world face towards the land of Israel, towards Jerusalem, and also here, that's why it was not aligned with the street to point in the right direction. So now we're going closer, and we're going to go inside, and we're soon going to see a picture of George Washington, which is part of this synagogue. And really, this synagogue has such an important part in American Jewish history. But I see here, Sherry wrote us on the chat that you were married at the Touro Synagogue. Can you actually unmute yourself if you want to tell us something about your memory from that day? Feel free.
I think they can't unmute themselves, but I'm gonna unmute her.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tadadi. Thank you. That would be great. I would love to hear your experience. That's really exciting. And in the meantime, we're going to take a look just here. So we're going inside.
Hi. Yes. Actually, what's fascinating about the synagogue is, I'm sorry, my grandchild is crying. What's fascinating about the synagogue is that underneath the bima was the Underground Railroad came up and got the slaves out. So it opens up.
Right. Thank you. So first of all, so right, thank you. As you mentioned, under the bima, there's a trapdoor. And it's really amazing because we think about why is there a trapdoor in a synagogue? So we can say in this case that maybe the founders of this synagogue came from other places, other countries where they might have been oppressed, and they wanted to make sure there was a place to hide in the synagogue, possibly. And as you mentioned, this was used as shelter on the Underground Railroad with slaves who were escaping from slavery in the South towards freedom in the North, and they found refuge in this synagogue. So first of all, I find it so meaningful that you were actually married on top of this trapdoor and in this synagogue, which is such a important part in both Jewish history and American history. The other thing here, and we're focusing on, sometimes we get asked, here's the George Washington. So sometimes we get asked at the museum from groups that are clearly not from the United States or younger and have not learned so much history yet. They say, who's that rabbi? And we say, no, it's not a rabbi. It's a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. So there we have George Washington right there. And really, we know that there was a special, as mentioned, this synagogue was founded before the Declaration of Independence, and founders of the synagogue didn't really know what religious life yet would look like in the new country. And they reached out to George Washington in the famous letter and received George Washington's response, which later became such a cornerstone in granting religious freedom in the United States. There's actually every year, I don't know if those who have been to the synagogue, if there's a reenactment of reading the letter every year at the synagogue. So we can put that on our list of attractions for when we can travel more easily. What we're now looking at right now is, I'm going to go back a tiny bit. We're looking at another synagogue. This is a synagogue that was built in the mid-20th century. And we're looking at a synagogue, if you've guessed correctly, Frank Lloyd Wright, Elkins Park in Pennsylvania. And we're looking here at a very modern synagogue, beautifully crafted. Although I don't know if there's anyone here that is originally from there. I've been told that the ceiling still leaks and it's hard. They haven't been able to solve that problem. This is another model in our museum. However, I chose to show you these pictures from one of the databases of the museum that's called Synagogues 360. Now, I wanted to introduce this to you. I'm going to share it online because this is a database it's a database of the museum that was acquired by the museum with photography and footage of synagogues around the world. You can search the different synagogues and see inside from 360 degrees all around. It's a great resource, especially now when we can't travel so much. So I'm going to put this link on the chat right here, and you can continue to explore. So when we go back to when we're talking about the Elkins Park Synagogue in Pennsylvania, so right, we see a modern synagogue, Japanese inspired architecture. It's a conservative synagogue, and also we can also see that this is when we're talking about a building telling us a story. This is clearly a community that is very proud of its Jewish heritage, right? It's something that we're not hiding behind walls. This is something that it's glass to the outside, a beautiful spectacle at night. This is something that the community is clearly proud of. Now we're going actually to the West Coast. This is another synagogue in the Synagogues 360. And this is the Tiferet Yisrael Synagogue in Los Angeles. An important part of the Los Angeles history, Sephardic synagogue. So we have the first Sephardic Jews came to Los Angeles in 1853. This synagogue the community was founded a bit later in 1920. And this current building is from the early 80s. Special story about this is that on October 1st, 1987, the King and Queen of Spain visited this synagogue, and it was reported to be the first visit to a synagogue by a Spanish king since the expulsion of Jews in 1492. So in speaking in Spanish, the king, he addressed the whole community, and the crowd was so large that they had a TV and a screen outside, and he praised Jewish contributions to letters, science, and arts during the Middle Ages, a rich tradition that Spain lost when it expelled the Jews. So this is the inside of the Sephardic Synagogue, Tiferet Yisrael in Los Angeles. If you have anything to add about this synagogue, if you've been there, also please write in the chat. We'd love to hear you. So just before we go on to the next display, which is actually a bit of a few voices from contemporary voices from in photography right now, I want to share a photo. This is a photo of, this is a photo, we're gonna see it a bit later, but I just wanted to show it to you right now. This is a photo of one of the displays in the new core exhibition at the museum. What we can see is it's a Chanukiah, right? We have the eight branches, what we're going to light soon on Hanukkah and the next holiday. We have the eagle. It's a bit hard. You'll see it a bit later in the presentation. An eagle in the middle, and we have the Statue of Liberty a Statue of Liberty holding each candle. Now, this display was created by the German-born artist Manfred Anson. He was taken out of Nazi Germany as a child, then was in Australia, and then came to the United States in 1963. And he designed this Chanukiah for the centennial celebration of the Statue of Liberty. Now here, he explained that he tried to unite his Jewish heritage and his American heritage. So if we're talking about the concept of American Jews or Jewish Americans here, Manfred Anson, he says, I merge those two identities. Those two identities come together as one. And I would love to ask you here, and this is kind of a bit of a frame for what we're going to say, what we're going to see, some of the displays about how those identities come together. But talking about Hanukkah, such as this Chanukiah, if you could write on the chat, if anyone here also likes Chanukiah with both imagery from Americana imagery as also Jewish symbols as well. So please write in the chat if you have a Chanukiah such as this one, or light something else on Hanukkah with other American symbols. Feel free to share. Great, thank you, Bill. Yes, it is, right, great and unique, definitely. Here, I know a lot of people have a skyline of the New York City. Some people like that. We have in my family, we actually have a Chanukiah of the Lower East Side, where some of the family members came through there. So, yeah, so it's interesting to see some of those symbols there as well. And now, so I'm going back to the museum. We're now gonna visit another exhibit, which is, and look at how, and look at some voices from American Jews in that exhibit. And that is gonna show us some of the different diversity and different values in that we can see that come across here. So what we're looking at are pictures from the Jewish Lens. The Jewish Lens is both a program and an exhibit that is where we ask teens, and in this case, rabbinical students from around the world, to capture a Jewish moment. Now, the photo that you're seeing right now is actually, as I mentioned, from a rabbinical student, Hila Singerman, who was asked to capture a Jewish moment this year during 2020 and after the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Hila Singerman, she took this picture which she calls making the minyan. And what she says here, how does she explain the picture? She says, my brother, pictured right, studies in a traditional Orthodox yeshiva. I, a queer woman and aspiring rabbi, study in an egalitarian seminary. Now, because of COVID-19, we pray and learn side by side. So in this picture, I think, first of all, we can really see a captured moment, right, of our new and crazy and unique experiences this year. We can also see the voice of different streams of Judaism, right, and different denominations and different diversity that we see in the Jewish world, or more accepted in the Jewish world now than in the past, and also how that comes across in families as well. And I think she really explained that in such a beautiful way. Another picture that we are going to see right now, which again, we're talking about voices that capture values of American Judaism that we can see as being part of the greater story. This comes from a bit of a younger student, Talia. This is from Chicago in Illinois. The Anshe Emet School. And here we're looking at stained glass windows from the synagogue. The synagogue is an older synagogue in Chicago. What we can see here is she called it an eye to Zion, because we have here the Star of David, and it says Zion, Zion. But what's also special about these windows is that they have both figures from Jewish history, but also from American history. We have Benjamin Franklin, it's again combining both of those heritages in the synagogue. So we can see that here with the light shining through. This now comes from, as we can see, from Washington, D.C. This is from 8th graders on a trip to the Capitol. Eliana Dente, she's from New Jersey, but again, she was visiting Washington. She calls this Havdalah at the Capitol. And I think this is, we can see people coming together. And as we know, we can see that this in a way shows how the Jewish involvement in social justice, meaning getting out there and making a voice being heard. And as that is also something that we can really see in values right here. I see some things on the chat. Thank you, Hazel, for sharing about the menorah. We see here also about Jews in color. I'm actually gonna say something about that in another minute. And also Michael Gobin about Franklin was supposedly anti-Semitic. So here also there's a question of also how we retell history and what figures, what we choose to bring in from people's personal stories and how they're also part of the general American story as well. And it really is interesting there how that comes across. Right now, we're going to be entering our Heroes Gallery. I can see some of the smiles on your face. This is our gallery for kids. It's geared for ages 6 to 12, but we take in people from 6 to 120. It's a great gallery, a lot of fun, very hands-on. So that's actually going to have to wait for when you come to the museum. Sorry. But I'm just going back in a second. But again, we're focusing, this is called Heroes, Trailblazers of the Jewish People, from sciences, culture, literature, arts, revolutionaries, sports, and bringing in all these different figures to a suggestion for a Jewish Hall of Fame. Also here, we always like to say these are different figures that are in the gallery, but also we always like to ask visitors to create their own gallery and who they would put in this gallery as well. So one of the people in the gallery actually is not from America, but he had an instrumental part in modern Jewish history, and that's Ferede Aklum. Ferede Aklum was very, very really instrumental and one of the key people who led the way for Ethiopian Jews through Sudan to come to Israel in the years prior to Operation Moses, which was the big operation for the first big wave of immigration from Ethiopia to Israel, which was in 1984 and 1985. Ferede started a few years before and really paved the way for Jews to come in. But we also know that American Jewry was very, very involved and in bringing the Jews from Ethiopia to Israel. What we're looking at now is Zahava. Zahava is this is from we have a gallery on Operation Moses and hearing the voices, personal stories of Ethiopian Jews in Israel from a reflection of 30 plus years. Actually, a bunch of the stories are on the YouTube channel, on the YouTube channel of the museum, and you can hear them there. Zahava has actually a very interesting story. This is this picture of her now, and she's holding a story. She's holding a picture of when a few days after she got to Israel in an absorption center. She came on Operation Moses. Now she lives today she lives in California, and she came as a child from Ethiopia to Israel, and then her family immigrated from Israel to the United States for economic reasons. So first of all, she brings in a voice of immigration, Jewish immigration to the United States today, and we see that from Israel also, and from other places as well. She also brings a voice of as mentioned here in the chat, of Jews of color, here in this case from Ethiopia, but we have others from other places as well, or people that embrace Judaism. And she also brings in a voice of bringing in different aspects of identity. and of both Israeli identity, American identity, Jewish, Ethiopian, and brings that into this really beautiful picture here, both of the question of now and back then. But going back into our heroes gallery, we wanted to frame put a focus on a few of those people who are in the gallery, and also to bring different voices from American Jewish history. So as we can see here, a picture of Mickey Marcus. Here's what we're going to see on the left is how it appears in the gallery. Actually, everyone in the gallery is all drawn. It's all cartoons. Sometimes we get asked, well, why don't you have a picture of them now, just like I'm showing you today? And here it was a question also on the curating team, because we have other people in the gallery itself. We have Moses, we have King David, we have Donna Grazia, who from the Middle Ages. We have all these different figures. Some we have pictures of, and some we don't really have pictures of, and kind of a way to make them to make everyone equal in a way, and also to show it, to make it very playful and fun. Everyone is drawn personally. But here I brought in some of the pictures as well. So we have Mickey Marcus, 1982, and you can see here to 1948. In 1948, Mickey Marcus, he was the son of Romanian Jewish immigrants. He served in Europe in World War II. He was also at the liberation of Dachau. And then after World War II, as many others as well. And if we have anyone here who is part of this, please write on the chat, and we would love to hear you. Also came to Israel to volunteer during the War of Independence. He volunteered in the Haganah, and he was active in the fighting. He was also, though, unfortunately killed by friendly fire. Part of the reason is exactly because he came from overseas. He was off the base, came back to the base, and there was, in the meantime, there was a changing of the guard, and he did not speak Hebrew, and he knew the password, but when he was asked to tell the password, he didn't know, and he was actually shot. Right, so Nisan mentioned Machal, Nachon, right, a lot of Mitnadvei Chutz La'aretz, or volunteers from overseas. That was the group of, that was very involved and really, really instrumental in Israel's War of Independence, both in all types of the fighting, also in the Air Force, and also in the Navy, and bringing in weapons and etc. So that is that's a bit on Mickey Marcus. He was also buried at the West Point Cemetery. He was the only person buried there who died fighting in a different country. Right now, we're looking at Sandy Koufax. And baseball player, right? One of the greatest baseball players of all time. And in the first game in 1965, refused to pitch because it fell on Yom Kippur. So we can see here that in a way, conflict between the wish to succeed and merge within society, but also a desire to remain loyal to Jewish heritage, Jewish traditions. And we know that these questions come and still are presented to us today. And here, this is a figure that sure a lot here know and remember, but that's also something that it's important for us that people today know. And also when we have visitors from around the world, from Israel and around the world visiting our museum, it's a great figure for them to know and to include. Actually, the new exhibit is also going to have a baseball hat and ball signed by Sandy Koufax. We have here Barbara Streisand, right, representing the arts and culture and music, and also the bringing in both Jewish prayers and into mainstream music. We know her appearance in film, in Yentl, and really incorporating that. And of course, our RBG, also in the gallery, the first Jew and Jewish woman to be laid at the state capitol. We know how, right, the words of the Hebrew words, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue in her office. This is this is actually part of the displays that is being installed right now in the new museum. We have this which she donated to the museum, and also her lace collar and her book, which she inscribed to the museum as well. I would love for you in the chat, while we're going on, if you could write who an American Jewish hero that you would want to include in the gallery or add to the gallery. There are others besides the ones that I showed here. I would love to hear your suggestions here as well. So feel free to add and to write. One of the things that we have is always here, and I always quote in the gallery, I always like to quote the curator of the September 11th Museum in New York. And she says, she quotes that museums are not there to tell us what to think, but what to think about. And I love that quote because she's really asking us to look back and say, okay, we're seeing a suggestion for a certain narrative, or we're seeing inspiration to think about something, but really it's back to me. And what I'm thinking, again, telling us museums are there to tell us not what to think, but what to think about. And at the end, at the exit from the gallery, the Heroes Gallery, we have a wall where then people can write their own hero and her there. So we have, so we have Brandeis, Henrietta Zoll, Leonard Bernstein in the gallery, and actually all those three are in the gallery. So great suggestions. They really are. Those three are there as well, and feel free to continue writing. So thank you. Great. So from the Heroes Gallery, we're now going to be going upstairs.
Annie, he was in the choir with you.
We're going to be going upstairs into our humor gallery. The humor gallery is, we're talking about Jewish humor around the world. And we're looking at what composes Jewish humor and also how we see it in different places around the world. So we're going to start with this clip right here, Woody Allen from Annie Hall. Here we go.
Oh, yes.
I can't believe this family. Annie's mother is really beautiful. And they're talking swap meets and boat basins. And the old lady at the end of the table is a classic Jew hater. And they really look American, you know, very healthy. They're like they never get sick or anything. Nothing like my family. You know, the two are like oil and water.
Let him drop dead. Who needs his business?
His wife has diabetes.
Diabetes?
Jack Adams
Is that
is
an
the new
excuse,
president.
diabetes?
Let me tell you.
So from Woody Allen, we're going to take a glimpse to the Marx Brothers, and then we're going to talk about the two of them. Here we go. Okay, great. So just going back here. So great. So first of all, I love seeing some of the smiles coming up from there, looking at these two clips. And it's interesting to also think about them together. So we saw the clip, Woody Allen's film Annie Hall from 1977. We're talking about the two families, one against another, when meeting the family of his non-Jewish girlfriend, comparing it to his family. And it's interesting because Woody Allen, clearly Jewish, he brings into his work that of being Jewish. That's talked about publicly. Whereas if we go back here, we're a few decades before, so the Marx Brothers, and this clip from Duck Soup, which still brings up a lot of smiles and is fun to see and to see his talent. So extremely well known, but never brought up his Jewishness in his works. So it's a question of how we're how we're looking, how is Jewish representation brought in, and what made the difference in those decades. And also and I'm looking here is Woody Allen is the question of worthy of inclusion, giving all the subsequent revelations, correct. And that's something that we is definitely raised, and it's a question. Unfortunately, there are people there's some other people in the Israeli part also, which since have also have different facts being here. Here I brought him in not to focus on him, but to focus on the concept of bringing Jewish identity, or speaking about that Jewish heritage, to the front of entertainment, and looking at the difference that we see. You mentioned on the chat here the question of Seinfeld or Mel Brooks, right? Mel Brooks started off in the Catskills entertaining for Jews. Later on, became mainstream entertainment. So we see a real change, or kind of a greater story here being told that we can see through entertainment. And also the question is, it's the difference of the difference that 4 decades made, and how might representation now, 43 years later, be different as well. Here we're looking at the Three Stooges, the comedy which stands for Yiddish American vaudeville type. We're looking now recently at the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, the recent show, and the 3 seasons that came up, which is bringing the humor through the perspective of Jews in New York. And as Adi said, we're going to focus on this exhibit more in our next session. So this is a small peek into that, but it's telling us a larger story about personal identity. Thank you. Here, this is another example when we're looking at Adam Sandler and his Hanukkah song. So soon Hanukkah, I can tell you here in Israel, I've actually seen in the supermarkets, they've already started to sell the sufganiyot, the jelly donuts. And once we see that, then you know that we still have quite a few weeks, but Hanukkah's around the corner. So this is a bit of a preview. But here we can see, right, so in this humoristic song, Adam Sandler performed on Saturday Night Live. We can see really the question of an American Jewish identity of Jewish identity in America. Now, the whole concept of how Christmas changed or really transformed Hanukkah is a topic for a whole different tour, and it's fascinating to think about that. But these questions that really are brought up around this holiday, they can shed a lot of light about the ongoing debate about what Judaism should be in America and what that looks like. Here, we're gonna just walk through briefly. This is part of the new exhibit. Here, I'm just going forward a bit. This is, you can see the skyline on top of Tel Aviv, just to conclude with two further displays, and then open this to questions as well. So what we're gonna take a look now is right here is E.T. This is one of the displays that's going to be there. And we're looking at Steven Spielberg's creation. And besides reminding us of this film from 1982, this also brings up a question about the symbol of feeling like an outsider. And Steven Spielberg, he also mentions he grew up, he was born in Ohio, and he suffered from some acts of anti-Semitism. And some people then translate or bring in the story of E.T. as a symbol to being lonely, and also communicating with a friend from another world. And that, in a way, Elliot, the boy who finds E.T., he might actually be a reflection of Steven Spielberg while he was young. But of course, we know that Steven Spielberg in 1994 really transformed the discourse around the Holocaust with Schindler's List, both inside the Jewish community with more and more documentation taking place, but also across the world as well. And right now we're coming back to the Chanukiah. We can see it right here. This is again Manfred Anson's Chanukiah, bringing in how he views his American Jewish identity merging together, where he also brings in the Statue of Liberty. And we know that the Statue of Liberty also has another Jewish connection, besides being the first symbol of the free world that many of the immigrants saw when arriving to the shores of the United States. Also, we have the poem written by Emma Lazarus, Jewish Emma Lazarus, on the Statue of Liberty, although she was American born and both her parents and grandparents were born in America as well. And we'll conclude with her famous words: "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," that were engraved on the statue's base, and that also what was welcomed many of our families when coming into the United States. And I see that's right. She was also suggested, right, for a hero in the gallery. So what we did here is we had a quick zoom in. You got to see some of the different topics that the museum deals with, but also a zoom in on the story of American Jews here at the museum, and how those different questions are come across in some of the displays. So I'd love to open this up for questions. If you have any questions, feel free on the chat. I see Calvin, could you discuss the tension between assimilation and Jewish tradition and religion in America? So I think, right, those questions are really big questions throughout the generations. And I think very often we think these are issues that our generation is dealing with, or we're dealing with right now, but we can see that these were things that came up both in the early 20th century and before, in the 1800s, those questions. And on the one hand, sometimes it could be very depressing, or we could some people might choose to see some of the developments in not a good light. But some people also, if we look back, we can also see things in a good light. And also when looking at the overview of Jewish history, is seeing how that the Jewish people and Jewish history are something that evolves, and we can see a lot of those issues coming across in different ways throughout the generation. So I know that's not really an answer, but just to touch upon that. Okay, so how do you deal with the various branches of the American Judaism and the differences between them? So thank you for asking that. So this is something that when I mentioned is at the museum, you are part of the story. We said you're part of the story. So here we want, on the one hand, we want every visitor to find themselves in the museum, but also you are part of the story, meaning there are a lot of other parts to the story as well. So first of all, in terms of representation, and this is something that's also very, very important in the new museum and the museum being redone, is to show representation. So when you come into the synagogue gallery, there's a beautiful video art presentation from Netana Tokef, from the prayer from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it starts, and it shows six different cantors, both women and men, who are performing this prayer. And it's something that it starts off with Rabbi Angela Buchtel performing this. And this is something that it's really important for us, that yes, when we have all types of groups, right? We have Israeli groups that are coming, we have groups from around the world. some of them might not have seen a woman rabbi or cantor before, and that's important, something that's important for us to show and to and that they can be aware of and encounter at the museum. In the new display, in the new museum, also on the top floor, basically you're going to start, the visitors start primarily at the top floor, which is the Jewish world today, and there's going to be a whole display on various denominations of Judaism. So that's important for us to show there as well. And also recognizing the cultural, linguistic importance of Yiddish in American Judaism. So the answer is yes. That's something that comes across a lot in the humor exhibit as well. And also when we talk about Jewish languages, we at the museum we talk about different gateways to Jewish peoplehood, or how people interact with the connection to the Jewish people. One of that is Jewish languages, which is Hebrew, of course, but not only. It's Yiddish, it's Ladino, it's dialects of both of Hebrew and Arabic that we can see, or that are spoken in different Arab lands. So that's also important. We actually also have a series. It's in Hebrew, but a lecture series on Yiddish, which takes place every year as well. So I'm going to write my email right here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I would love to hear you. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to invite you to is, first of all, I shared the Synagogues 360 that you can continue to explore. And I wanted you to invite you to be part of this display. This is a display that's going to be part of the new museum. It's going to be, when talking about the Jewish world today, this is going to be a big screen that relates to different communities around the Jewish world today. When I say communities, we're talking about community in the very large sense. This could be synagogues, this could be online communities, these could be social action communities. And we have from all around the world right here. I'm just going to randomly pick one. The Ken Jewish community, this is a community in California, and they're actually, though, originally Mexico, and they're very much in touch with their Mexican roots as well. So we see that there are all these different questions about their name, what defines them as a community, and different special ceremonies and traditions. And here, this is an online, it's a website, but it's also displayed at the museum. And we would love to, we're trying to get as many communities represented by the opening in December. So we would love to have you represented here as well. So I'm going to put the link in the chat as well and invite you to be part as well. So thank you very, very much. Toda rabba. Oh, and my email as well, right? If that, oh, you have that there too. So feel free, and I hope to be able, we're looking forward to our further meetings as well. But we also hope to be able to welcome you at the museum sooner than we think.
Yeah, Elle, thank you. Thank you so much. I know that I thank you on behalf of everyone that was on the call today. We appreciate you being here. We learned so much.